All right, hi everybody. This is John Martin, trial lawyer with the KJC Law Firm in Boston and Worcester, and sometimes Providence. And with me is my good friend and one of my personal heroes, Lori Franchina. Hi, Lori.
Hi, John.
How you doing?
Good.
So you are the plaintiff in a case that's fairly famous for gender discrimination and sexual harassment, and especially for the rights of gay people in the workplace. And it's called Franchina versus the City of Providence.
Correct.
So thank you for coming on here. We've been doing a lot of work on our social media about Pride Month and different important things, and this was certainly an important month. And your case immediately came to mind. So tell us, what made you decide to file a lawsuit in the first place?
My job was very, there was a lot that we had to do every day, trauma and rescue and fire. So I just basically felt after so many months and years, in fact, of trying to talk to my administration, it was going nowhere. Anything that happened, it was going nowhere.
Now, in the first 4 or 5 years you were at the Providence Fire Department, though, you didn't experience any harassment or discrimination. They didn't start messing with you until you filed a complaint because somebody sexually harassed you, right?
Yes. Yeah, correct.
That was pretty bad. That guy. Tell everybody what that guy was saying to you that first night that you met.
Right. I'd never worked with firefighter Andre Farrell before. He had come into the building. The ladder company and engine company were out on a run, box alarm, and he approached as I was pouring my coffee to get ready for the shift and whatnot. And he approached by saying, "Are you a lesbian or are you just doing everyone?" I looked at him and I said, my face said it all. But I said, where is this coming from? And then he continued to address me with issues. Comments. I don't normally like to work with women, but I know you do your job or something like that, but it was all, the misogynistic talk. It was, as they call it, water cooler talk. He just felt comfortable enough to come up to me and make statements. And, they're embarrassing, and they also were hurtful.
Tell him about what he said when you were in the emergency department that night, dropping off a patient.
So this was our first encounter. Going to and from runs, he deliberately, because we were in a vehicle together, would talk over the radio and not hear the dispatch. But when we got to the hospital that night, we had transported a patient that needed an IV and whatnot, and he was going to get the emergency supplies. And as he came out, he was still in the doorway of the hospital where we drop off patients, where the triage is. There's probably 2 nurses there. There's multiple patients, and the trauma alley. And in front of 2 of my colleagues, also other lieutenants, he licked his fingers, he circled his nipple, and he says, "My lesbian lover, how are you doing?" And I just crumbled inside. Nurses and everybody could hear him. I said, that was the first time ever I was addressed in that fashion as a lesbian. I'd never been addressed prior with such negativity, and misogyny.
And it was a big crowd and everything. And then you still didn't complain about him until later on he came into your officer's quarters.
Well, the complaint came from a rescue lieutenant, Michael Legault. He had witnessed it, knew how I felt, and he called Chief Kurt Verone, which was our DAC, Deputy Assistant Chief on Duty. And then the chief acted. Right.
And he acted swiftly. Chief Verone is somebody that you're very fond of, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
At one point.
What happened in the officers' quarters?
Yes. At one point before that the chief got word of it, He had entered my room with just his socks on, his boxers, and a t-shirt, Providence Fire issued t-shirt, and I was in bed. I was in my quarters. Officers have their own quarters. Firefighters sleep and rescue technicians sleep in an open dorm for them. And it wasn't until I realized I left the door unlocked that he came through, and he sat at my desk with his feet up on the desk, and he was asking me just such inappropriate questions, you know, kind of reiterating what he had already said, like, if you want babies, I can help you with that because we like the same thing. And it just blew my mind. I ordered him out of my room 3 times, and it wasn't until the 4th time that I said, get the F out of my room.
Now, before this point, when the complaint got filed that you'd been sexually harassed by this guy, over 4 or 5 years, you'd had no problems. And actually, you'd been very quickly promoted to an officer's position, right?
Correct. About 1.5 years in.
All right. So I'm going to, on my screen, you won't see it, but I'm going to switch over to the First Circuit Court of Appeals decision.
Okay.
And I'm going to read what the judge wrote about your life after that sexual harassment complaint was filed.
Correct. Yeah.
And Judge Thompson wrote, sticks and stones may break some bones, but harassment can hurt forever.
Yeah.
Cunt, bitch, lesbo are all but a smattering of the vile verbal assaults the plaintiff in this gender discrimination case, Lori Franchina, a former lieutenant firefighter, was regularly subjected to by members of the Providence Fire Department.
Correct.
He was also spit on, shoved, and in one particularly horrifying incident, had the blood and brain matter of a suicide attempt victim flung at her by a member of her own team.
Correct.
So that was what your life was like after word got out that you were part of a sexual harassment complaint that you didn't file.
Right. The initial, it was in September of 2006 that Andre Farrell sexually harassed me. And he did get his job back in 2008. But my incident at 43 Job Street was July 29, 2009. So yes, sequentially, it just, you know, the hostility increased to the point of, you know, I felt I was in fear a lot of times for my life at work, and just, and other people, you know, like going to a victim's home. And I knew that if I didn't show up, it got to the point I knew that if I didn't show up, that they would do their job. But by me showing up, they resisted, to prove that I need them. I need those firefighters. And how dare I do that to Andre Farrell, you know?
Well, it says, let's go through a couple of things that the judge wrote before we move on to the trial. But she says that referred to as the C word and as bitch. There was a witness in your case, another female firefighter, who said that she never heard you referred after 2006. She never heard you referred to by your name, only as the C word or as bitch.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unbelievable. And you were an officer. You were an officer.
I was an officer, yeah. And at one point, 21 negative comments were written on a whiteboard. You know.
They wrote a list of 21 things about you.
All 21 things about Lieutenant Franchina, correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And nobody ever owned up to it.
I had come into my shift. It was on the board, written in black marker. And it remained on the board for almost 2 days. I had come back from my night shift, you know, that would have been the 3rd day. So my 3rd day coming in, it was still there. Yeah.
And there was another incident where you were trying to rescue a gunshot victim, and the firefighters on the scene wouldn't assist. Tell us about that.
That incident was 43 Job Street, July 29, 2009, approximately 11:45 at night. We responded quickly because we were right in the area. We actually asked to pull over and let the cops go by us. We were there quickly. When we arrived, we were called in immediately for a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. And therefore, we got right upstairs. We didn't have to worry about scene safety. The officers were already there. And I had started to witness that if an engine officer crossed his arms, that nobody would assist me. And as you know, an engine company comes with the rescue because manpower, we need help carrying. And at one point, I had reached over and found that the victim had a radial pulse, which was bounding, systolic pressure greater than 90, and had an airway. He was breathing. So
just to jump in for a second, when
Sure.
you say those three factors, and I only remember because I learned this from you when we were
Yes.
but when there's the viable pulse, the systolic blood pressure, and a
Yes,
third factor, that's a viable life that could be saved.
correct. Absolutely. 100%.
And you've
That is
actually saved,
we train
you've saved gunshot victims to the head before.
Correct.
Yeah.
And as I had mentioned at some point, that was in 2009, and in 2011, we witnessed our United States Senator, Gabrielle Giffords, being shot in the head, and we know her outcome. Her part of her head was missing, but she survived, and
Right.
she held her seat for some time, and now she's, a victim advocate of gun violence. But again,
So
that
in
woman
this-
survived,
Yeah. So in this particular incident in 2009, you were telling the firefighters to move the victim's body from the
Correct.
house out to your truck so that you could perform life-saving measures, and they refused.
They did. They did. Like I said, I started to see that if the engine officer crossed his arms, I did see that night. There was Lieutenant Robert Jackson was crossing his arms. His men did not assist at that time. I told my partner, open up the stair chair, let's go. I tried to move him, and and 4 people are standing around, and I'm trying to move a gunshot victim by myself into a chair, which then I'm gonna have to carry.
Did the victim have any family there that saw you trying to move
Yes.
this body without any help?
I believe it was his wife.
And how did his wife respond to all this going on?
She was in the kitchen, and which was just off. The bedroom was adjacent to the kitchen, so she could hear and see in the doorway. And she asked at one point, why aren't they helping her? And the victim is a he, so they were referring to me. I was the only female on scene besides the wife.
Right. So just to get the visual here, there's a gunshot victim bleeding. There's several firefighters standing around. You're trying to move the body.
Right.
And the victim's wife is saying, why isn't anybody helping her? Why isn't anybody helping get my husband medical help?
Yeah. Yeah.
That must have been a harrowing experience for you.
It's so startling. It's so the impact that it left on me is I felt as though, if I didn't show up, maybe the person would survive. I felt, and I started to question myself. I started questioning my integrity, like the way I did my job. It changed. It changed dramatically. I did not have all the assistance that all the other officers had in rescue.
Right.
And it changed dramatically.
It wasn't just dangerous for you, it was dangerous for the people who needed medical help.
Correct.
They
They were deprived the first response of an engine officer, engine arriving to scene and starting the process of assessment, early intervention. They can start IVs, our engines. We're all course certified, and we all have to maintain what they call a cardiac license with intubation skills. So we're all certified.
One of the things that Judge Thompson wrote about in the decision is the incident where you had blood and brain matter flicked onto your face. And this is an incredible story.
Right.
I believe it's the same incident, but at this point now, you'd finally gotten, well, tell us how you got the body into the rescue truck, because you actually had to ask the police to help you move this body because the firefighters wouldn't do it.
I went into the kitchen area and I found an officer with a white shirt on, which meant a command officer, a lieutenant or whatnot, possibly a captain. And I said to him, this is on you now. My men are not listening to me. They're not following my orders. He's a viable candidate for life. You get that body downstairs. You're in charge. He was dumbfounded. He didn't know. And nobody's ever done this to me before. What is going on? I said, he has a pulse and he's breathing. I need him in my truck. And so, in turn, these are the kinds of things that I was faced with. Not to go off topic, but my chiefs would make a verbal order, which would last 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And after that, it was null and void unless it was put in writing. Again, right. They were resisting at that point.
But yeah, I mean, paramilitary organization, when there's
Yes.
a rescue in progress, the lieutenant from the rescue truck is in charge of the scene. Like, there's no doubt your orders are supposed to be followed.
Yeah, that was a really big thing by the defendants. She's only got, say at the time, 7 years on job, and the lieutenant has 25. There's no way she's in charge. But between you and I, we found, our smoking gun, if you want to call it that. I hate to use that term, but like, here it is. It was our standard operating procedure that had to be so clarified. And they rewrote it, I believe, for that time period where the engine officer is there to assist, and that was in bold print, assist the rescue officer. So they started to change policy and procedure for those guys that weren't following, those guys to help Lieutenant Franchina. Very difficult to feel, to experience. Yeah,
well, that is an interesting thing at the trial, is that the city told the jury that repeatedly that the officer with the most seniority is in charge of the scene, which obviously would be firefighters with 10 or 20 years, but their actual written policy that we found after many years said that when there's a rescue in place, that it's the rescue lieutenant who's in charge of the scene.
Of the medical scene.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious. You see it on the highway too, where there's an engine there, there's a rescue there, there's a car accident. The rescue is in charge of the medical. And I think this makes it clearer than in a bedroom with somebody with a single gunshot wound. When you're on scene of a rescue on the highway, the rescue's in charge of the medical. And yes, those firefighters and officer are in charge of the scene protection of us, in them. So yeah, it's explained that way. It's very clear. But again, you're walking into a room, you got a 25-year captain, and you got yourself with 7 years on the job. You're automatically thinking the male is in charge of, the more experienced. But again, we have policy and procedure, and I think that had to be really explained to our jury. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the incident in the truck that night when the guy flicked the blood and everything all over your face.
So there's a couple things that I really want to explain with that. The body had been carried down eventually. He lay there in the street, and that's when it became clear to me that he's going to die if we don't do something quickly. He was sitting in, lifeless in the chair, and it's, the stair chair, and I had my stretcher out ready to go. I had my lines hanging, and I waited for him to be put on my stretcher. Again, I can't move him by myself. Finally, he gets in, and two things happened. One was the BCI officer from the Bureau of Criminal Investigation. She had bagged his hands for GSR. And that being said, the way the engine officers described the scene made the BCI officer react differently. So in the truck, we already had that happening, which was unheard of for me. It's usually a dead person that, bagged their hands for GSR. But
GSR is gunshot residue.
Correct. Yep. So again, he was in my truck. I started, my partner started CPR while I got a line. He was intubated. And then my partner was touching a lot of different things. And CPR, he had copious amounts of blood and possibly brain matter and fluids on his gloves. So I said to him, I'm ready to take over CPR. You're all set. And I said, and change your gloves. I'm doing CPR. And he asked me, well, how do you want me to do that? And, it's a very known term that you just go to the receptacle, the garbage can, turn them inside out and drop them. But instead, within seconds, I felt that glove hit me in the side of the head with blood, brain, and fluids that cascaded in my eyes, nose, and mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, he'd actually snapped the glove. So
It was snapped near my face. And yes, when I went like this, I could see blood.
And then you kept performing CPR.
I did. My interventions were made, IV, CPR, airway. And I had actually pushed a round of meds. His heart started up. He had a pulse when he went into that hospital. We were still ventilating him, though.
And I remember what you were talking to the jury about when you testified is that you had to keep your eyes closed because it was burning from the blood and the sweat. And tell us what it was like to be doing CPR under those circumstances, because from what it sounded like your face.
Yeah, my immediate response was, you just made me a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a victim, a patient, whatever. I had actually, gotten to the hospital and I had to have my eyes flushed. Again, they did their policy or procedure, which was protocol to give me the HIV meds. Mm-hmm. I did that. And that's when I started the testing and throughout my career for HIV and hepatitis C.
So this is all going on from 2006 to 2009. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to April of 2016.
Yeah.
And you are now, as of April something 2016, you were on the nightly news in Providence almost every night. You were on the front page of the Washington Post. You were on the front page of the Providence Journal. You were the victor in a substantial federal lawsuit and
correct,
pretty large verdict. Tell us about the journey from being so brutally harassed at work to being a victor in a federal lawsuit. How would you summarize that?
I felt vindicated. I felt as though my story was heard. I felt that my truths were heard. I had a jury that was compassionate and could see the pain and the suffering that I sustained. So yeah, I feel as though the trial helped me in a lot of ways.
Good.
But it also was an opportunity to really, really expose the misogynistic views of our administration. It showed a lot about, my trial was intense. I was on the stand for 3 days. Not only just to get the story out, but like for those command staff, the mayor and the commissioner of public safety, to hear that this really happened and I'm ready to tell it. And it was very impacting, but also it made me feel like this was an opportunity to tell the truth, and see how others saw it,
You did have a compassionate juror. In fact, I think I remember jurors were crying at various points during your trial.
Oh, yeah. I could not make it through the entire 43 Job Street incident without having to have a break. It became very raw once again. All the feelings came back of, disappointment, shame on my part, because I felt shameful. I felt as though my worth wasn't of value because I showed up and this is the way they treated a victim because they could. Because they could, no administration was ever disciplining.
Yeah. Well, we entered into evidence, I believe, 30 or 40 written complaints about harassment.
Yeah.
One answered.
Yeah, and I had also gone to my chiefs. I have recordings of them on, say, Friday, telling me that they're going to do something, Lieutenant. We got your back. And again, in the streets on Monday, and no change, no follow-up written statement by my administration, just words.
Well, we had emails to the POC officer of the city where they had told the city that officers had been disciplined for harassing you, and then months later, the PO officer found out that was a lie and no one had been disciplined.
Yeah. Yep.
So tell me about that. You get into this lawsuit, and there are chiefs from a very large and prestigious fire department telling
Yeah.
lies about you, and
Yeah.
you watch the lies get exposed over an 8-day trial.
Yeah.
What's that like to see the people who are saying false things about you be exposed?
So that was kind of unique in a sense, because they would come out and say, well, she did her job well. We all knew that she was very capable. And then followed by, but she comes across bitchy, and she, she orders them around. Yeah,
You were
I
an
guess,
officer.
I guess with, my
It was your
position as
job to
an
give people
officer,
orders.
I do have to take control of a scene,
Yeah.
But again, the defendants, Kevin McHugh, Attorney McHugh, said multiple times that a woman could not be in charge of a man. One, so there's that misogynistic thoughts, of complications. Already we're going, why can't a woman be in charge? So we had paperwork, written orders about rescue being in charge on the medical scene, and the engine or ladder company assisting assisting the rescue with, life-saving measures. Yeah. So there was violations of all that, and that was told. I expressed that.
Now, your case was unique because at the time, unlike now,
Correct.
at the time, Title VII did not
Correct.
prohibit harassment or discrimination based on sexual orientation, but we were actually the first case, or you were the plaintiff in the first case, to establish that sexual orientation could be protected under a theory called gender plus.
Yes. That was I think the most important for me.
Why is that?
I had started out this process and said to my family and friends that this process is greater than me.
Mhm.
And I could go back to friends 14 years ago, or even my bartender at Applebee's. Did I tell you that this could happen? This is all I wanted to happen. I know I lost my job. I lost my career.
Mhm.
I'm still at this time fighting for my pension. Years later, I retired in 2013. But it's to the point where I just wanted this to happen. I was so willing to possibly lose more than my career and whatnot to fight this in a court system of showing that you discriminated against me based on one element,
Mhm.
and that element should not even be part of your business. And then
Amazing.
we made a change. We made a change.
Mhm.
You and me, baby.
We did. We
We
did.
did.
It's amazing to be part of. So listen, I know that it was difficult to choose to subject yourself to a lawsuit and all those
Correct.
things. To you people out there that have or are experiencing harassment or discrimination at work, who are
Yeah.
considering a lawsuit but might be intimidated or afraid, what kind of advice would you give them? What would you say to them?
Well, my advice is that I've always carried journals, date books, and I would always jot down scenarios that took place. And it was very easy to go back and then read just a synopsis and say, oh my gosh, that's, and I can elaborate on issues. And I had done that since college. So I really believe people need to write things down,
Mhm.
not just for the believability, but to keep themselves focused on, and trying to remember everything. Trying to remember is so difficult for some people, especially with anxiety or any type of other, stressors. So I would recommend writing things down. I would recommend, even in your own words, self-record, to tell people that, and you can also hear the pain in your voice when you're doing that.
Mhm.
So a lot of those things I really did. I mean, obviously I had a great therapist that has since passed away, which was Dr. James Curran.
Mhm.
And so weekly meetings with him helped too. So I definitely recommend therapy, and to get your thoughts protected. I don't know if you know what that means. Like in my mind, I had to get things out in writing. I had to talk with somebody, and at least it got out there. And I'm okay now. I can do my next day. And without that, I mean, it holds you back. The depression, the anxiety, the self-worthlessness that you experience, you know, is just so heartbreaking. And you know, confide in your family, talk with groups, you know, like, you know, your friends, and really just see where you're at.
And what about the decision to bring a lawsuit? Was it worth it?
Yes, it's 100% worth it. And the reason I say that is because my case was very, it's very disappointing, you know, on the way the city handled it, the way the administration handled it. For 4 or 5, 6 people that did this to me, I think it would have been easier and less costly to discipline according to the policies and procedures and rules that are already in place. But that did not happen. And now we went on to, you know, sue them. I do have to say, I used my entire life savings to sue. You know, what kind of attorney is gonna, and I went to 9 attorneys in the state of Rhode Island, and I was denied everything. I was denied by everyone. I had gone to you were my 10th attorney. And again, is this guy gonna believe me? How is this guy gonna really say, oh, it's because you're a lesbian, they discriminated? Like, the believability is still, like, coming to you. I felt, you know, like, you have to get a great attorney that's gonna work for you, that's compassionate, that sees both sides and can understand why defendants are saying this and why your plaintiff, me, was saying this. I think the attorney selection is, like, intense, but you got to get a good attorney too. And again, you have to realize that some people do go back to work after they've paid and suffered, literally paid and suffered. And that's what happened. I didn't get to go back to work, but I know other women, after hearing in the state of Rhode Island, several female police officers that have sued and won monetary value and still kept their job. So I think with our decision, you know, John T. Martin and KJC Law Firm and Simon Mann, we attacked and we went after it. And Benjamin, you know, everybody that helped believed in it. So I think that's what people need to know. It's going to cost. Hopefully it's not your job. It's just monetary. And hopefully you are vindicated when you come out, you know, and I believe if I didn't have you, I don't think I would have won. No.
I don't know. I didn't know I was 10th. I knew I was pretty far down on the list, but
you were 10.
Wow.
Well, you were 10. I went to 9 in the state of Rhode Island.
Well, at least I made the top 10. I guess I could be happy with that.
You are. Well, you're number 1 now, so.
Well, yeah, no,
absolutely my number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just admire what you did so much, and you know, it really changed a lot of people's lives. So thank you for coming on here today. It was great.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, our you know, SCOTUS decision is you know, Supreme Court of the state, you know, Supreme Court of the United States. I never thought I'd be here.
Our decision was the First Circuit, but yeah, there's a recent SCOTUS decision that came down that said that Title VII does cover sexual orientation. So that's huge.
And I think it's going to be a little bit easier for people now to make that decision. And like I said, hopefully it assists them enough through my trial notes and whatnot, that they can get the same verdicts. I was not.
I agree.
Yeah, I was not. I did not think at any point that I was going to win. I did not.
But you kept plugging away, even though you thought you might lose, even though you thought you were going to lose.
They didn't know who they messed with. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm stubborn, and I know what happened was wrong, and there was so many things that could have prevented it, and shame on them for not doing it.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you went to 9 other lawyers, because it makes you wonder how many people had a great case and they went to a lawyer, or one or two or three lawyers,
Yeah.
and got rejected, and then they just gave up on something that could have, you know.
It's absolutely the truth.
Yeah.
There's a political aspect to this, and what an attorney's career can do, positive or negative. I'm so thankful that we were able to join together and conquer this. Your descriptions, after hearing my stories, were validated through you. I feel as though you processed everything that I experienced and said, wait, this story has to be told. And I value your concern and dedication to my pain and suffering. And that's hard too, to get an attorney that,
Yeah, well, I didn't want to.
late night phone calls.
I didn't expect to turn this into about me, but thank you. I feel the same way about you. You know, I love you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I really don't. And and a lot of times when I've seen, the city of Providence and Franchina, I think at some point John Martin should be written in there too. So don't forget the T though, because there's a lot of John Martins out there. It's John T. Martin of the KJC Law Firm.
You're so funny. I love it.
Gotta get you in there, buddy.
Yeah. Well, as soon as this COVID craziness is over, hopefully I'll see you again. And again, thanks for coming on here. I really, really appreciate having you.
Anytime, John.
All right.
Anytime.
Talk to you later.
Thank you for everything. Thank you.
You.